One built a guillotine. The other built a state. One sent a queen to the blade in the name of the people. The other sent an empire to its grave in the name of the proletariat. Both believed they were liberators. Both became architects of mass death. Both have names that still divide a room. Tonight, Maximilien Robespierre and Vladimir Lenin, the two architects of revolutionary terror. Two completely different revolutions. One question: who was truly more dangerous? Welcome back to Evil versus Evil, Monsters of History. This is episode 11. Born in Arras, France, in 1758, Maximilien François-Marie Isidore de Robespierre was the eldest son of a struggling provincial lawyer. His mother died when he was 6. His father, devastated, abandoned the family and disappeared into Germany. 6-year-old Robespierre was raised by his maternal grandparents and his aunts. From the start, he was a quiet, intense, deeply serious child who collected pigeons in cages and wept when one of them died in a thunderstorm. He was a brilliant student. He won a scholarship to the prestigious Lycée Louis le Grand in Paris, where a young Camille Desmoulins sat in the row behind him. He read Rousseau obsessively. He believed in the perfectibility of mankind. He believed that a virtuous republic could be built on earth if only the corrupt institutions of the monarchy could be torn down. He returned to Arras, became a lawyer, and was elected in 1789 as a deputy to the Estates General, the assembly summoned by King Louis XVI in the last desperate months before the French Revolution. Robespierre was 31 years old. He had never tasted political power. He was about to drown in it. Over the next 5 years, he climbed. He spoke in the National Assembly. He joined the Jacobin Club, the most radical political organization in revolutionary Paris. He gained a nickname, the Incorruptible. He lived in a single rented room. He wore the same powdered wig every day. He took no bribes. He had no mistresses. He believed his personal purity gave him the moral right to demand the same from everyone else, on pain of death. In January 1793, Robespierre voted to send King Louis XVI to the guillotine. He had once written, as a young lawyer, that the death penalty was barbaric and should be abolished. He had crossed his own line. In October, he voted to send Queen Marie Antoinette. In December, he voted to send Madame Elizabeth, the king's pious sister, whose only crime was being related to the wrong man. By the spring of 1794, he had voted to send dozens of his own former colleagues to the same blade. Georges Danton, the giant of the early revolution, was condemned and beheaded in April. Camille Desmoulins, the boy who had once sat behind him in school, followed a week later. The reign of terror was now his. As the most influential member of the 12-man Committee of Public Safety, Robespierre presided over a campaign of revolutionary purification that swept across France. At least 17,000 people were officially guillotined. At least 10,000 more died in prison without trial. Entire towns suspected of royalist sympathy were burned to the ground. In the Vendée region of western France, an estimated 170,000 civilians were massacred in counterinsurgency operations that historians have called the first modern genocide. Robespierre announced a new state religion, the cult of the Supreme Being, with himself as its high priest. He led a public festival in his own honor in June 1794, dressed in a sky-blue coat, carrying flowers and grain. Other members of the committee watched him with new suspicion. He had become a god. Gods could not be controlled. On the 27th of July, 1794, in a date known to French history as the 9th of Thermidor, the National Convention turned on him. He was arrested in the Hôtel de Ville. He attempted to shoot himself and missed, shattering his lower jaw. The next afternoon, he was carried to the guillotine. The executioner ripped off the bloody bandage holding his face together, and the crowd cheered as the blade fell. He was 36 years old. That was Robespierre, the lawyer who tried to legislate paradise and built an abattoir. Born in Simbirsk, Russia, in 1870, Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, the man who would call himself Lenin, was the third of 6 children in a comfortable, professional family on the banks of the Volga River. His father was a school inspector. His mother spoke 3 languages. The Ulyanov children were brilliant, disciplined, and politically alert. In 1887, Vladimir's older brother Alexander was hanged at the age of 21 for participating in a plot to assassinate Tsar Alexander III. 17-year-old Vladimir reportedly said, on hearing the news, that there must be another way. He spent the rest of his life finding it. He studied law. He devoured Karl Marx. He became a professional revolutionary. He was arrested. He was exiled to Siberia. He fled Russia entirely and spent 15 years in exile in Switzerland, London, Munich, and Paris, writing pamphlets, founding journals, and quietly assembling the most disciplined revolutionary cadre in European history. He called them the Bolsheviks. They called him Lenin. When the First World War shattered the Russian Empire and the February Revolution of 1917 toppled the Tsar, Lenin returned to Russia on a sealed train provided by the German government, who hoped he would destabilize the new Russian Republic and pull Russia out of the war. Their bet paid off catastrophically. On October 25th, 1917, by the old Russian calendar, Lenin and his Bolsheviks stormed the Winter Palace in Petrograd, arrested the provisional government, and seized control of Russia. They had perhaps 20,000 active fighters in a country of 160 million people. Within months, they were running the entire state. Lenin moved fast. He withdrew Russia from World War I. He nationalized industry. He abolished private property. He shut down opposition newspapers. He banned every other political party. And he created the institution that would become the model for every 20th century police state. The Cheka, a secret police force authorized to arrest, interrogate, and execute anyone deemed an enemy of the revolution. The Russian Civil War followed. Between 1918 and 1922, an estimated 7 to 12 million people died, mostly civilians, from combat, executions, disease, and starvation. Lenin authorized the Red Terror, an explicit policy of mass execution against the bourgeoisie, the clergy, monarchists, suspected counter-revolutionaries, and ultimately anyone the Cheka decided was unreliable. Hundreds of thousands were shot. Entire villages were emptied. In 1921, during a famine he had helped engineer through forced grain requisitions, he wrote a letter ordering local officials to seize grain from churches, hang as many priests as possible in public squares, and make sure the executions happened during the famine itself, so that the people would associate clergy with starvation. He suffered the first of 3 strokes in May 1922. He died on January 21st, 1924, at the age of 53. His body was preserved and placed inside a glass coffin in Red Square, where it remains today, almost exactly 100 years later. That was Lenin, the revolutionary who built a state on the bones of every previous one. Now, let us put these two side by side. Category 1. Body count. Robespierre's terror killed between 20 and 40,000 people directly, with another 170,000 killed in the Vendée. Lenin's Red Terror killed an estimated 250,000 directly. The Russian Civil War he triggered killed millions. The famine he engineered killed 5 million more. The edge, by an order of magnitude, is Lenin. Category 2. Tools of terror. Robespierre relied on the guillotine, an essentially medieval tool of state execution, deployed in public squares. Lenin built secret police, mass surveillance, forced labor camps, internal passports, and the infrastructure of the modern totalitarian state. The edge is Lenin. Category 3. Political philosophy. Robespierre quoted Rousseau and improvised. He had no comprehensive theory of the state he was trying to build. Lenin wrote dozens of major theoretical works that became the operating manual for every 20th century communist state. Mao, Castro, Ho Chi Minh, the Kims, Pol Pot, all of them studied Lenin. The edge, decisively, is Lenin. Category 4. Length and durability of rule. Robespierre was effectively in power for less than a year before his colleagues guillotined him. Lenin ruled for 7 years, and his state survived him by 67 more. The edge is Lenin. Category 5. Cultural staying power. Robespierre gave the world the modern political guillotine and the modern political purge. Every dictator who has ever conducted show trials owes him a debt. Lenin gave the world the modern revolution itself. His face hung in every classroom of every communist country on earth for most of the 20th century. Both are unforgettable. Both are taught. Call this category Lenin, narrowly. So, the categories split 5-0 in favor of Lenin. But categories do not capture everything. Here is the wild card. What if Robespierre had survived Thermidor? Imagine the incorruptible still in power in 1795, 1796, 1797. Napoleon Bonaparte is just a young artillery officer at this point. With Robespierre still alive, there is no opening for a Bonaparte to seize. France stays under permanent revolutionary terror. The guillotine never stops. And the lesson that Lenin learned a century later, that revolutions must build a state apparatus or be devoured by their own enemies, is not learned in time. Modern dictatorship as we know it might never exist. Robespierre's failure made Lenin's success possible. The verdict. By the categories, Vladimir Lenin wins. He killed more people, built a more durable system, and shaped more of the 20th century than any other revolutionary in history. He is the man who made totalitarianism a working political technology. But here is the part that should disturb you. Robespierre died on the same blade he had sharpened. Lenin died in his bed, surrounded by aides, mourned by a state that exists in modified form today. The lawyer who tried to build virtue by force was executed by the system he created. The revolutionary who built a police state to enforce his ideas was given a mausoleum and 100 years of immortality. Robespierre was the incorruptible. Lenin was the inevitable. The winner is Lenin. The one whose face is still in your history textbook is Robespierre. Next episode. Genghis Khan versus Napoleon. The two greatest conquerors in human history. One conquered the largest land empire ever assembled. The other almost conquered Europe. Only one of them died in his bed.